Hello everyone, thank you for joining me for Delphi the Early Investigation. Today I'm going to talk about the early weeks following the murders of Abby and Libby and how the investigation progressed. As early as February 15th, 2017, around 7 p.m., the Indiana State Police began circulating a still image of an individual reportedly seen on the Monon High Bridge Trail near where Abby and Libby were slain. Now, this grainy photograph appears to capture a Caucasian male with his hands in his pockets, walking on the rail bridge. His head is down, and he seems to be walking towards the girls. Now, on February 19th, 2017, the person in the photograph was named the prime suspect in the double homicide. Law enforcement stated that they believe that the person on the bridge with the girls is the person who committed the murder. They did not give any indication as to why they felt this way. They institute a statewide manhunt the very next day, and on February 22nd, law enforcement holds a news conference and releases an audio recording where the voice of the suspect, though in some degree muffled, is heard to say, "Down the hill."
Guys. Down the hill. Guys. Down the hill. Guys. Down the hill.
Police said that Libby started to record before any criminal behavior began to occur. Now, police indicated that the additional evidence from the phone had been secured, but that they did not release it so as to not compromise any future trial, which leads people to believe and speculate that there is much more on the video than what is shown. Now, multiple news agencies were at this news conference on the morning of Wednesday, February 22nd, and WLFI 18 wrote an article that very day which said the recording was longer than what has been released, and police won't release anymore to protect the integrity of the investigation. But they've seen the video and likely won't be able to stop thinking about it. Now, Tobe is later interviewed and states he goes home and sits on his sofa and replays that video over and over in his head along with this voice. He believes that he's heard the voice before, but he can't place where. Now, where the assertion that the unreleased video is something investigators won't be able to stop thinking about is unclear, but the full press conference can be found on YouTube, and nothing seems to give this impression. It is impossible, or isn't impossible, I should say, for the reporter that wrote the article to have spoken to someone in law enforcement prior to or after that press conference in order to ascertain this, but it is also possible that this journalist meant only to imply that any video of a killer who's approaching would haunt investigators, and I truly believe that. Surprisingly, after all this speculation about if the attack was recorded or not, when Sheriff Tobe Lesenby was asked point blank the attack was recorded in a video interview, his answer was plain and simple that it was not. Now, First Sergeant Jerry Holman tells us that investigators have more audio from Libby's phone, which was found with the girls at the crime scene. And when he says that, it pretty much gives us the idea that the phone was found with the girls. There has been much debate online as to whether Libby's cell phone was physically recovered by law enforcement, and the idea being that the video could have been pulled from an app or cloud service if the phone was missing. But that quote from Sergeant Holman was written by reporter Alexis McAdams, and she's one who will cover this case in its entirety for the next 5 years, wrote in an article that was printed by Fox 59 and the Indy Star 5 and CBS 4 that, if it's accurate, would confirm that Libby's phone was indeed recovered at the crime scene, which leads to all the speculation of whether it was or wasn't. It seems to have been answered that it was. Now, there's an article from WTHR that says that the audio from Libby's cell phone was played for the victims' families, including a mention of a man they noticed behind them. Now, in this article written by Emily Longnecker from WTHR on August 12, 2017, she writes, police say the girls mostly heard talking about stuff girls talk about in the recording, but that they also mentioned the man. And there's been a lot of speculation about this on social media and what has been said or what wasn't said. And there seems to be an indication that the girls were aware of him, whether it be the fact that he was coming towards them rapidly on the bridge, and that's when they become uncomfortable. That's still to be seen, because law enforcement has given us no information about what may or may not be on the video and what the girls actually said or saw or were thinking. Now, another thing of note here is Mike Patty reveals that he went back to the house to retrieve phone information and brought it to the police so they could start pinging Libby's phone on the 13th when they were searching for the girls. Now, this was sometime obviously after 5/20 when they were reported missing. And an article was published by WLFI, which interviewed Mike, who says, the cell phone has been pinging around town and there is a cell phone tower, but the ping was last noted around 5 to 6 hours ago. And they say the phone is now dead. And I saw the texts where they got delivered, but they were never read. Now, you remember with an iPhone, you can have your iPhone set to where texts show up as read or unread, and you can tell when someone has gotten your message and read it. So that's what he's speaking about here. And it is probable that the pinging around town was truly a miscommunication around cell phone triangulation or cell tower function. And Mike also said that he retrieved all iPads and iPods or computers or any electronic gadgetry that he could come across to take back to law enforcement. And it is likely that at this point in time, the social media accounts were being scrutinized for correspondence with the girls and analyzed by the multi-agency task force at this time. We can only conclude that. But we are going to later realize how important that item will become in this case, because law enforcement was very clear, as was the family early on in this investigation, that there did not appear to be any catfishing of the girls. The girls did not go out there to meet anyone that day, and that they were not seen talking to anyone on social media. That was pretty much what we were given from law enforcement and the families. Now, this would be a huge disparity that many on social media could not believe. There were a lot of posts written on Reddit. There were a lot of speculation on Facebook groups and even on YouTube, where people came out and said they just didn't believe that. Given the girls' ages and how teenagers nowadays are so big on social media, it would really be hard to not fathom that there's a possibility that they may have been conversing with someone. Now, even if that's true, it doesn't necessarily mean that they were conversing or communicating with anyone that was the murderer. I want to make that clear, that we don't know that. And so it would be highly inappropriate to actually come out and say that that's what was happening. But, you know, the family members are adamant that they didn't know that the girls were talking to anyone. And all I can say, as being female and having gone through my teenage years, and I have to admit, we didn't have computers or cell phones back then, so I've just dated myself a little bit, that, you know, there were things we held back from our families that we didn't tell them. And so it doesn't surprise me if the girls were talking to someone online that they would not have shared that information. Now, the scanner traffic from February 14th can be heard saying that they found girls' clothing and cigarette butts and requested evidence bags. There is a complication to this investigation because this crime was committed outside in what can be deemed as a public space. So the evidence that was collected could easily be unrelated to the case. It would be wrong to assume everything that was collected that day ended up being related. We have to remember that there were hundreds and hundreds of searchers in those woods looking for the girls. And between their cigarette butts and urinating on trees and spitting and God knows what else, you can see how evidence collection could prove a nightmare for any forensic technician. So on February 23rd, Tobe Lesenby gives an interview, and based on this interview, articles were written, such as one by CBS 4, stating Lesenby wouldn't go into specifics about the forensic evidence in the case, although he did say that investigators had requested that DNA evidence be fast-tracked. Tobe, however, would later recant that by saying, "I have never confirmed DNA evidence was recovered in this case." Now, on August 14th, 2017, First Sergeant Jerry Holman gives an interview to CBS 4, and in the videotaped interview, when asked specifically about DNA, he replies, "At every crime scene, you're going to have DNA, and we are still working on identifying all the DNA that we have. Law enforcement has never revealed how the girls were murdered." This has also caused social media to speculate all sorts of scenarios. Now, I will say that early in December, Crime Dive Investigates put out some information on their Facebook group stating that Becky Patty had confirmed with them that law enforcement has Bridge Guy's jacket. Now, I want to be very clear here that Randy Gravitt said on his show on December 5th that Becky refuted that and said she did not tell them anything. She had been given or sent the same information by someone. And it's my feeling that if law enforcement indeed has Bridge Guy's jacket, they're not going to reveal that to anyone. No one's going to know that piece of information. But stop and think about it, because if that's the case, then the witness accounts of seeing Bridge Guy after the murders, how would they have known that he was dressed with the jacket on if law enforcement has the jacket? Now, when I say that, then my mind goes back to, well, possibly they recovered the jacket later, and maybe he came back and left it, because they do say that murderers come back to the crime scene. And I do believe that. Most of the cases that I've ever followed, there was evidence that they come back and revisit the scene. Now, if Bridge Guy is not local to Delphi itself, but from surrounding community or area, that still would be relevant. But if he is somewhere out of state, then maybe that is not relevant. So all of this information, with them not giving us much, has caused enormous speculation on social media regarding all sorts of things that could or couldn't have happened, and especially surrounding the DNA. And even to this day, 5 years later, people are arguing every single day on Reddit on whether or not law enforcement has DNA or doesn't have DNA, even though multiple law enforcement officials, including Doug Carter, have come out and told us point blank, yes, they have DNA. So we just need to keep those things in mind as we move forward. Now, law enforcement has never spoken publicly in reference to specific named witnesses or sightings. That's something else that I want to make perfectly clear. They have vaguely confirmed that there were multiple witnesses when describing the process of creating the composite sketches, but news sources have also never directly referenced witnesses either of their sightings of the offender. And to me, that's a really big deal. When you've gotten news sources and reporters and investigative reporters who are also not talking about witnesses, to me, that means that law enforcement has requested that they not. Because it doesn't make any sense to me that investigative reporters wouldn't be out there trying to source and find information from eyewitness accounts. Now, the knowledge of the witness sightings is mainly given to us by the family of the deceased and through social media rumors. With knowing that and going back to everything that we've heard over the last 5 years, I think it's really important that we focus on the fact that a lot of what we think we know to be true may or may not be. And I know that law enforcement made a comment a year and a half or so ago saying that YouTube content creators have it wrong. Now, what they have wrong, they weren't explicit enough to tell us, but it begs to think or to say that it could simply mean that a lot of what the conjecture and speculation and things that have gone on in this case surrounding social media, after you say something so many times, people start believing it as fact. And I think that there's a lot of fact checking that needs to happen in this case because there's just simply so much misinformation that's being put out there for everyone. And it's especially someone new who's just now starting to follow this case. There's just so much for them to unpack that it's really quite difficult. Now, further complicating this matter is the existence of two sketches of two entirely different people. Now, I've had people argue with me and say, well, if you look at them and you do this and you do that, it really could be the same person. Well, that might be true since sketches aren't photographs. They're a composite of what a person may kind of look like. And I think we also get caught up in that. When it comes to the sketches, people think, well, this guy doesn't look like the sketch. Well, he may not completely, but the main portions of his face are going to be recognized by the sketch, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So one of which is a person not considered relevant at this time, and that's kind of jumping to 2019 when Doug Carter says at the press conference when they release the new sketch of what they actually believe Bridge Guy looks like, he basically tells us that they're not going to tell us to disregard completely the first sketch, but they're going to tell us that it's secondary. So we've been told that it's not considered relevant, and now we've also been told that it's secondary. So again, here comes the conflicting information that law enforcement throws out there, which again just muddies the waters terribly surrounding the case. Now, these sketches were both alleged to have been created by witnesses speaking with a sketch artist. Now, determining which alleged sightings were of the offender and which were of the no longer relevant individual is almost impossible with only the publicly available information that we've been given. We could speculate forever on this, and believe me, I'm sure people will and will continue to, but we really don't know much. And so because of that, it's really hard to say. the speculation behind who was at the trails, when, and where, and who they may have seen has been a huge matter of disinformation all over social media for the past 5 years. I mean, we've heard of the arguing couple. People have said that there was a couple, a man and a woman, who were in an argument on the bridge or under the bridge, and that this person, these two people were there, and at the time or around the time of the murders of Abby and Libby. So there's been that thrown out there, which has never been corroborated. The teenage girl that saw a bridge guy near the Freedom Bridge, that also law enforcement has never said is accurate. However, there has been a number of people that have come forth that has said that that account is absolutely accurate, and she saw him well. So I tend to go with that and believe that one, but we all could be wrong, because again, as I stated, law enforcement has never come out and said we were right or wrong on these witnesses that we believe may or may not have been there. And Anthony Greeno from True Crime Investigates, he talks about dog walking lady, I believe Mrs. Weber, from the southeast side of the bridge. That's her property that you walk onto. She was out walking her dogs and happened to run into Bridge Guy. That account is out there as well. And there are a lot of people that don't believe that that happened. So, you know, it's just one of those things that there's just so many different people talking about different witnesses and putting things out. We just need to make sure that we realize that they're not truly factual. Because if law enforcement hasn't told us, then we probably can assume it hasn't happened. But again, when people are trying to do investigatory work around this case, whoever it may be, they're trying to interview people, and especially local people who are going to know a lot more than we do, because locals tend to talk. So, you know how that goes. So the families have spoken about a man that Derek ran into when he arrived at the trail around 3:14 p.m. on the 13th of February, when he was supposed to pick the girls up. He's often referred to online by the moniker of Flannel Shirt Guy, or FSG, and it has been said publicly, so I don't have a problem saying his name, that this person that's being referred to is Dave McCain, who is responsible for the upkeep of the trails along with his brother Dan. Now, this man was seen walking away from the Monon High Bridge Trail, and Derek asked him if he had seen any girls on the trail. And the man told him that he had not, but that he'd seen a couple on the bridge. Now, this is not an official account of what happened or transpired, but it does come from Becky Patty and Derek's mother and Libby's grandmother. And I just feel that Becky has no reason to not tell us what transpired. Now, Derek has never spoken publicly about anything, so again, this is hearsay, and we have to, keep that in mind as we're going through the facts of the case. Now, a female witness chose to publicly comment on a Facebook post written by a family member of the victim, discussing how she was also on the trail that day, shortly after the girls were. And she wrote on Facebook that she even walked all the way across the bridge and back. And I believe that we can all say that this person's name was Cheyenne, and that she only saw a guy when she first got there and another couple once she got on the bridge. And she didn't see the girls at all. I also did not take the trail that leads to the right, meaning the 505. I only took the trail that leads to the bridge, which is the 501. Now, something has always bothered me in this case from the very beginning is with all the people that were in and around these trails during the time the girls were there, how did no one see the girls that day? That has just always been something that nags and nags on me. It really has bothered me because there were just so many reports. I mean, some people have said there were upwards of 50 people out there over the course of the day, and that's a lot of people because when you stop and think about the size of this trail, it's not that big, and it's a narrow walking path. It's not like, this big place. And so I would think that if there were that many people out there, somebody would have seen Abby and Libby, but nobody claims to have seen them, that we know of. Again, I don't think that we're privy to all of the witnesses or the eyewitness accounts. So we have to take all of that into consideration. So with all of that being said, there are more witnesses to come, but I'm going to end it here today. And I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts on this as we get ready to move along into the next few weeks after this. There's a lot that we now know that we didn't know back in February of 2017. And I'm speaking specifically about the Keegan Anthony Klein situation that came out on early December in the Anthony Shots profile. So one of the things that I will be doing and working on to bring to you is I would like to do a side-by-side of the things that were going on, the timeline with Abby and Libby, and the timeline of the things that were going on social media with Keegan and things that he was posting, because I think it's extremely telling. So that's one of the things that I'll be working on for you in the next week or so to try to get out there, because I really think it's important that we take a look at that. But I really appreciate you all stopping by today and listening to my video and watching. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you get notified whenever I upload a new video. And thank you so much for supporting Behind the Crime Dorm. And the best thing that I can say to everyone is to be safe out there. And thank you again for stopping by. See ya.